Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Dr. Siti Nur Aisyah binti Ahmad, the instructor for this course. This presentation is an introduction to and background of Malaysian and Singaporean literature in English. Malaysia and Singapore are currently two separate countries. However, they have a long shared history of cultures, languages, and European colonization from the 16th century to the 20th century. One of the things that Malaysia and Singapore have in common is a history of literature written in English by local writers. These writings and the issues and contexts they address are what we will explore in this course. First, let's go back to Malaya and Singapore in the 19th century, when English medium learning institutions were established. In 1813, the Raffles Institution was established in Singapore, offering English education to sons of the local ruling class. In 1816, the Penang Free School was founded. These marked the beginning of English medium education in British-ruled Malaya and Singapore. The Straits Chinese community were among those who were English educated. The wealthy Straits Chinese sent their sons to be educated at English medium schools. What about university education in the 19th century? Malayans and Singaporeans who excelled in their studies were eligible to apply for the prestigious Queen's Scholarship, established in 1887. The scholarship winners had the chance to further their studies in Britain. According to historian Neil Corr, many Straits-born Chinese won this scholarship and continued their studies in British universities. Therefore, it was no surprise that some of the earliest literature in English in Malaya and Singapore were produced by English-educated Straits Chinese. Some of the early literary writings in English in Malaya and Singapore appeared in the Straits Chinese magazine. The magazine was published between 1897 and 1907. It was edited by Song Ong Siang, Dr. Wu Lian Te, and Dr. Lim Boon Keng, who had all been Queen scholars. Neil Corr states that the writers of short stories in the Straits Chinese magazine, like early reformists in Japan, regarded English literature as a window to the West. English literary models influenced their writing. In 1927, the first novel in English by a Straits Chinese writer, Dr. Lim Boon Keng, was published. The novel is titled Tragedies of Eastern Life. As for poetry in English, Koh Hong Ming was the first Anglophone Straits Chinese poet in Malaya and Singapore. Now we move on to two very important events in the history of Malaya and Singapore, which would later contribute to a burst of creative writing in English. First is the Second World War, which lasted from 1942 to 1945 in Malaya and Singapore. The end of the Second World War led to rising nationalism in Malaya and Singapore. Many political parties and movements began their lives from 1946 onwards. Their common goal is merdeka, or independence from colonial rule. Secondly is the establishment of the University of Malaya in Singapore in 1949. It was the result of a merger of two existing institutions, Raffles College and the King Edward VII College of Medicine. MU students came from the Malay Peninsula and Singapore. They were a multi-ethnic and multilingual group. What brought them together was the English language, the medium of instruction used at MU. At the University of Malaya in Singapore, students publish literary and non-literary writings in English in various student publications. As you can see in this timeline, from 1947 to 1957, there were 4 student publications in English: The Cauldron, The New Cauldron, The Malayan Undergrad, and Write. 1947 to 1963 was also a period of intense political upheaval in Malaya and Singapore. It was the period of active nationalism. Calls for independence from British rule were growing louder. Around the world, various new independent nations emerged in Asia and Africa after long and bitter struggles against the British Empire. In Singapore, MU students also participated actively in political movements against British rule. Many worked together with the Singaporean trade unions in demanding better rights and wages for workers. According to Dudley D'Souza, it was with the new cauldron that MU student publications saw a turn towards being a serious intellectual journal, different from its predecessor, the Cauldron. The editorial of the New Cauldron in 1949 displayed a belief in a common culture for a people to be a nation. Here, we can see an early example of the intersection between national identity and the role of literature in creating national identity. Now, let's take a look at some of the University of Malaya students who published their literary writings in English in the student publications. Poetry was a popular choice of genre. Among the university poets were Hedwig Aruzu, Wang Gungwu, Edwin Tambu, Wong Pui Nam, and Yi Tiang Hong. As for prose in English, there were Kasim Ahmad, Lee Kok Liang, and Lloyd Fernando. As for non-fiction prose in English, it is important to mention Sibyl Kartigasu. She was not part of the group of MU students, but she was a doctor. Her memoir, Not a Dram of Mercy, about her experience during the Japanese occupation of Malaya, was written in English. Malaya became independent in 1957, and on 16 September 1963, Malaya, Singapore, Sarawak and Sabah formed the Federation of Malaysia. For 2 years, Malaya and Singapore were part of the same nation. However, their union did not last long. Singapore left the Federation of Malaysia in 1965. Both countries have since pursued different paths. The development of literature in English in both countries too has gone through distinctive phases according to Malaysia or Singapore's national policies. We have come to the end of this presentation. For further reading on the early phases of Malaysian and Singaporean literature in English, these are some recommended readings. Thank you.